Imagine, you are a woman in the heart of ancient Rome. The year is 17C. The marble streets echo with cheers from a crowd, not for a festival, not for a gladiator's triumph, but for your death. Your crime? Not murder, not treason, not betrayal of the empire, but simply defying the role that Roman law and men demanded of you. You are stripped naked, paraded before the mob. The emperor's decree is read aloud. The punishment? Execution in the arena by wild beasts. And thousands roar with excitement as a hungry lion is released into the Colosseum. This is not fiction. This was Rome's justice for women. And it was as horrifying as it was spectacular. What you're about to hear are the true, shocking punishments that women, wives, daughters, even noble ladies, endured under Roman law, from the days of the Republic to the height of the empire. Each punishment designed not only to kill, but to humiliate, terrify, and control. But before we uncover these dark secrets of ancient Rome, this is Royal Conspiracies, where we bring you the most dramatic, hidden stories of history's rulers and their empires. If you're fascinated by shocking tales of power, betrayal, and survival, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video so we can keep uncovering the past they never wanted you to know. To understand the punishments Roman women faced, we must begin with the law that ruled over every family. Patria potestas, the power of the father. This ancient Roman concept, dating back to the early Republic around 450 BCE, gave the male head of household, the paterfamilias, absolute control over his wife, children, and slaves. Under this law, a woman was never truly free. Even when married, her legal identity was tied to her father or her husband. If she disobeyed, if she dishonored the family, the punishment was not decided by courts, but by the father himself. And Roman fathers wielded that power with merciless authority. One historian records that fathers had the right to kill their daughters if caught committing adultery or even drinking wine, an act considered almost as shameful as infidelity. Yes, you heard that right. In the early days of Rome, around 200 BCE, women were not allowed to taste wine. If a woman was found drinking, her punishment could be death at the hands of her husband or father. The message was clear: a Roman woman's body was not her own. It was the property of her family, her husband, and above all, Rome itself. So, Rome found crueler and more public ways to remind women of this truth. The year is 18 BCE. Rome is no longer just a republic, it is an empire. And Augustus, the first emperor, has declared war on immorality. In his bid to reshape Roman society, Augustus passed a set of laws known as the Lex Julia d'adulteriis coercendis, the Julian law on adultery. This law was revolutionary, but also terrifying for women, because for the first time, adultery was no longer just a family matter, judged by the wrath of a father or husband. It became a public crime against the state. And the punishments? They were brutal. If a woman was caught in adultery, she could be stripped of her dowry, banished to an isolated island, and forced to live in disgrace. But if her husband or father decided harsher punishment was necessary, they had the legal right to kill the lover, and in some cases, the woman herself. One of the most chilling examples comes from the very heart of power, the imperial family. Augustus himself turned against his own daughter, Julia the Elder. Julia was loved by the people of Rome, witty, charming, and bold. But she defied her father's moral reforms, engaging in a series of affairs with Roman nobles. When news of her scandal broke in 2 BC, Augustus did not shield her. Instead, he invoked his very own law, the Lex Julia, and exiled his daughter to the barren island of Patria. There, Julia was forbidden to drink wine, forbidden to meet men, and forbidden to leave the island. From the glittering palaces of Rome, she was reduced to a prisoner, her body broken not by whips or chains, but by loneliness, humiliation, and the cold punishment of her father's will. And Julia's fate was a warning to every Roman woman. No matter your status, whether a commoner or the emperor's own blood, Rome would not forgive a woman who dishonored her husband. The law ensured that adultery was punished not just in private, but in a way that turned women into public examples. Their shame was entertainment, their suffering a warning. And yet, Adultery was only one of the crimes that brought unimaginable punishment. For Rome reserved even darker fates for women accused of crimes against the gods themselves. Among the most sacred women in Rome were the Vestal Virgins. Chosen as young girls, usually between the ages of 6 and 10, they were sworn into a 30-year vow of chastity to serve the goddess Vesta, protector of the eternal flame that symbolized Rome's survival. The Vestals lived in luxury, enjoying privileges denied to ordinary Roman women. They could own property, attend gladiatorial games, and even pardon prisoners. But with that privilege came a punishment so horrifying, it chills the soul even today. For if a Vestal Virgin broke her vow of chastity, she was condemned to death by live burial. This was because the Romans could not spill the blood of a priestess. So instead, they devised a cruel, ritualistic execution. Imagine the scene. The year is 114 BCE. The Vestal Virgin Cornelia is accused of secret affairs. Whether guilty or not, it no longer matters. The rumor itself has tainted her purity. At dusk, Cornelia is led through the Forum, the heart of Rome, surrounded by silent crowds. Her hands are bound, her veil torn. She is forced into an underground chamber, a small pit, prepared with only a lamp, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, and a little milk. The lid is closed. The earth is shoveled over. The crowd watches in silence as Rome buries one of its most sacred daughters alive. Her slow death, suffocation, hunger, terror, was meant to appease the gods, and to remind Rome that no woman, not even a priestess, was above its laws. History records multiple Vestals meeting this fate. In 83 BCE, under the dictatorship of Sulla, several Vestals were accused and buried alive. And in AD 90, during the reign of Domitian, 3 more Vestals were executed in this same horrific manner. Their bodies were never retrieved. Their names erased. Their only legacy? The warning that the flame of Rome burned brighter than the life of any woman. This was punishment not just of the flesh, but of the soul, a fate worse than death, for it denied them honor, memory, and the afterlife. And if the priestesses of Rome, women of the highest sanctity, could suffer such horror, what then of the ordinary women who defied Rome's power? The answer lies in Rome's most terrifying stage, the arena. For the lowest-born women, slaves, criminals, or captives of war, Rome's justice was not hidden in the shadows. It was displayed for all to see. The punishment was called damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. In this gruesome spectacle, women were stripped of dignity and thrown into the Colosseum or amphitheaters across the empire. The crowds cheered as lions, leopards, or even packs of dogs were unleashed. Sometimes, women were forced to play roles from mythology, dressed as Andromeda or Medea, only to be torn apart as part of a staged drama. A chilling account from AD 203 tells of Perpetua and Felicitas, Christian women who refused to renounce their faith. They were led into the Carthage arena, clothed in thin tunics, and set upon by a wild cow, its horns goring and trampling them before the executioner finished the task. These deaths were not just punishments. They were entertainment. And Rome made sure the suffering of women became part of its grand theater of cruelty. Rome was not only cruel to women themselves, it often punished them through the most unbearable pain of all, their children. In Roman law, the life of a newborn child did not automatically belong to the mother. It belonged to the paterfamilias, the male head of the household. And it was he who decided whether a child would live or be discarded. This practice, known as expositio, exposure, was common across the Republic and Empire. If a child was weak, deformed, or simply unwanted, it was abandoned on a hillside, left to die from cold, hunger, or to be taken by strangers and raised as a slave. And mothers? They had no right to object. Even a woman who had carried life within her for 9 months could be forced to watch as her child was taken away. One chilling account comes from the historian Seneca in the 1st century AD, who wrote coldly, "We slaughter a mad dog, we kill a fierce ox, we strangle a deformed child." To the Romans, this was not cruelty, it was practicality. But to the women, it was punishment. For disobedience, for dishonor, for poverty, the loss of a child was the empire's most devastating weapon. And sometimes, the punishment was even more direct. During certain treason trials, women convicted of betraying Rome were not only executed, but their children were stripped of inheritance, titles, and even their right to live within the city. The sins of the mother became the curse of the child. One of the most haunting stories is that of Fulvia, the wife of Mark Antony. After Antony's defeat by Octavian in 30 BCE, Fulvia's name was smeared in propaganda, her reputation destroyed. Her children by Antony were forced into political exile, their futures shattered not because of their own deeds, but because Rome had chosen to punish their mother's bloodline. For Roman women, motherhood, their most sacred role, could be twisted into a weapon. It was both their duty and their curse. And yet, if losing children was agony, some women suffered punishments that stripped them not only of family, but of their very identity and flesh. The next horror was reserved for women accused of witchcraft, poison, and secret knowledge, women Rome feared, and therefore destroyed. In the Roman imagination, there was nothing more dangerous than a woman with secret knowledge. To them, women who brewed herbs, mixed potions, or whispered spells were not healers, they were threats. The most infamous case erupted in 331 BCE. That year, Rome was struck by a mysterious plague. Dozens of nobles fell ill and died. Whispers spread that it was no natural disease, but the work of women with poison. The Senate ordered an investigation. And what they found, or claimed to find, shocked the city. According to Livy, the Roman historian, more than 170 women were accused of poisoning their husbands. Dragged into public, they were forced to drink their own deadly brews, a punishment both ironic and cruel. Many collapsed on the spot, choking on the very liquids they were said to have crafted. The fear of female poisoners only grew with time. By the late Republic, Roman society became obsessed with the idea that women were secretly using herbs, charms, and magic to kill, seduce, or control men. One chilling story comes from the reign of Emperor Tiberius, 14 to 37 AD. A noblewoman named Apicata accused her rivals of witchcraft. She claimed that women in Rome were casting spells and using poisons to rise in power. Those accused were dragged before the courts, tortured to extract confessions, and often executed, their bodies publicly displayed to deter others. Torture was common in such trials. Women might be stretched on the rack, their limbs pulled until they confessed. Others were burned with hot irons, whipped until their backs bled, or branded with marks of shame. But even when Rome punished women as witches, the fear never disappeared. Every sickness, every political death, every sudden misfortune could be blamed on women's hidden knowledge. And so the empire lived in terror of its own daughters, punishing them not only for real crimes, but for imagined ones. Yet this fear also reveals something deeper. Roman men feared women not just as wives or lovers, but as powerful beings beyond their control. And whenever fear arose, Rome responded with cruelty. But some punishments were not secretive trials or underground torture chambers. Some were staged as public executions, designed to humiliate noble women in front of the empire. In Rome, noble birth did not guarantee mercy. If a man fell from power, his wife could be dragged down with him. When Sejanus, the powerful Praetorian prefect, was executed in 31 AD, his entire family was condemned. His wife and daughter were stripped of their status, paraded before the Senate, and publicly humiliated before their execution. The same fate struck Pompeia Paulina, wife of the philosopher Seneca. When Seneca was ordered to take his own life by Emperor Nero in 65 AD, Pompeia begged to die with him. She cut her veins alongside her husband, but was spared at the last moment, left alive, bleeding, and dishonored, as a reminder of Rome's control over her body and fate. For noble women, punishment was not just about death. It was about erasing dignity, honor, and legacy. Their names were blackened, their images destroyed, their children disinherited. Rome knew that to truly destroy a man, it had to first break the women who carried his name. If noble women could be humiliated and executed, the fate of slave women was far worse. For in Rome, slaves were not considered people at all. They were property, tools, objects of punishment. The punishments inflicted on them were some of the cruelest in Roman history. Crucifixion was among the most infamous. Enslaved women who defied their masters, whether by running away, resisting orders, or striking back, could be nailed to wooden crosses along Rome's roads, left to hang for days under the burning sun. Their deaths were meant as warnings to every other slave. Branding was another horror. A runaway slave woman might be burned with hot irons, her forehead permanently marked with letters like, "If you, fugitive." The brand turned her body into a living sign of shame, visible to all who looked upon her. And punishments did not stop at pain. Slave women were often paraded naked through the streets, whipped publicly, or sold to brothels as punishment for disobedience. Their suffering was entertainment, their degradation a lesson in power. Roman law allowed masters to do almost anything to their slaves. As the jurist Ulpian coldly remarked in the 3rd century AD, "It is permitted to every master to punish his slaves at his discretion, short of killing them without cause." But even that line was often crossed. In 61 AD, during a revolt in central Italy, hundreds of slave women were crucified alongside men, their bodies lining the Appian Way. For enslaved women, there was no court, no trial, no protection. Their punishments were not just about control. They were about reminding everyone in Rome that to be born a slave woman was to be born without mercy. In Rome, the higher a woman rose, the more dangerous her life became. The wives, sisters, and mothers of emperors lived in luxury, but also under constant threat. A whisper of scandal could bring them to ruin. One of the most chilling examples is Messalina, wife of Emperor Claudius. Messalina was infamous in Roman writings for her alleged affairs, though historians often exaggerated her behavior to smear her name. In 48 AD, she was accused of secretly marrying her lover, Gaius Silius, while still the emperor's wife. Whether true or not, the charge was deadly. The Senate declared her a traitor. Guards dragged her to the gardens of Lucullus, where she was ordered to take her own life. But trembling, unable to do it, she was stabbed to death by a soldier. Her body was left exposed, the once powerful empress reduced to a cautionary tale of disgrace. Another victim was Julia Livilla, the sister of Emperor Caligula. Beautiful and ambitious, she was accused of plotting against her brother in 39 AD. Caligula banished her to a desolate island, where she starved to death, alone and forgotten. And then came Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero. Once the most powerful woman in Rome, she fell to the paranoia of her own son. In 59 AD, Nero ordered her murder. First, her ship was sabotaged to sink at sea, but she swam to shore. Then, assassins were sent to her villa, where she was stabbed to death. Her last words, according to legend, were chilling. "Strike my womb, for it bore Nero." For imperial women, punishment was never just about personal crimes. It was about politics, about eliminating rivals, about silencing women who dared to hold power in a world that belonged to men. And so, their deaths were framed as justice, but in truth, they were executions of fear. If there is one truth about Rome, it is this: punishment was never just about justice. It was about control. And nowhere was that clearer than in the way Rome used women's bodies as instruments of public shame. For noble women, exile was not enough. For slaves, torture was not enough. Rome needed punishment to be seen. One of the cruelest methods was public stripping and flogging. Women accused of theft, adultery, or treason were paraded half-naked through the forum, whipped before the eyes of strangers and neighbors alike. Every lash was not only pain but humiliation, their shame becoming the city's spectacle. In some cases, women were forced into staged sexual punishments. Accounts describe women being paired with animals in mythological reenactments, where they were symbolically, and sometimes literally, violated before roaring crowds. These so-called entertainments blurred the line between execution and perverse theater. The Romans even had a word for these punishments: infamia. It meant the destruction of one's honor, reputation, and place in society. For women, honor was everything, and to strip it away was to kill them twice, once in body and once in memory. But perhaps the greatest cruelty was not the whip, the cross, or the beasts of the Colosseum. It was the fact that these punishments were celebrated, cheered, recorded in triumphal histories as if they were victories for Rome itself. From the burial alive of the Vestal Virgins, to the banishment of Julia, to the execution of Messalina, and the branding of slaves, one theme remains. Rome used punishment not just to destroy women, but to remind every citizen, male or female, that the state, the father, the emperor, held absolute power. And yet, in remembering these horrors, we also remember the women themselves. Women who endured pain, shame, and death not for crimes of violence, but often for living outside the boundaries Rome allowed. Their stories echo through time, a reminder that history is not only the tale of emperors and generals, but of daughters, wives, mothers, and slaves, whose suffering shaped the very empire that sought to erase them. So the next time we stand before the ruins of the Colosseum, or walk the ancient stones of the Roman Forum, let us remember, behind the marble, behind the glory, lay the cries of women, punished, silenced, but never truly forgotten. This was Royal Conspiracies, where we uncover the dark and hidden truths of history's greatest empires. If you found this story as shocking and powerful as we did, make sure to subscribe, like, and share so we can continue to bring you more untold tales of power, betrayal, and survival. History is full of secrets, and together, we'll keep uncovering them.